The views, comments, and opinions of the following program do not necessarily reflect those of Morris Media Studios, MorrisMediaLive.com, or its affiliates. Listener discretion is advised.
Greetings, 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 and blessed Valentine's Day. Welcome to Faith Without Borders. I'm your host, Pastor Calvin Sauls. It is indeed a joy for us to be here with you, beloved, and we hope that you are safe and that you are well. And as we continue our time together, this journey, having this progressive and prophetic platform to see how we can invite thought leaders to come and engage in the critical issues, of our time in thought-provoking as well as solutions-driven ways, dialogue, courageous conversation, and we're doing that, of course, with a focus on, Los Angeles, the United States, and indeed the world. And so it is always a joy for me to just have you with us, and glad you're able to join us. Today, we are going to be exploring, the major decision that was made by the United States Senate yesterday in the acquittal of Donald Trump. Of course, as you know, this was his second impeachment trial that took place, and if you, like me, you follow these as closely as possible, and we will get into that and just look at the implications of that for multiracial democracy in the United States, but also look at it, from a perspective of security around the black vote. And I have just the right person that's going to join me for this conversation. He is the Reverend Dr. James Thomas. He's the pastor at the Living Word Community Church, as well as a professor for public policy at the California State University, at Los Angeles. He's part of Black Lives Matter. We are, of course, part of that whole movement, and we call ourselves Clergy for Black Lives, which just continue to provide, alongside Black Lives Matter, sacred resistance in this work of racial justice and racial equity. So I'm very excited to have the Reverend Dr. James Thomas with us. But before we bring him on, this past week we lost again a giant here in Los Angeles, a faith leader, not just in Los Angeles but around the world, the Reverend Fred Casey Price. He's the founder, senior pastor, of course, of the Faith Dome, as it's known, but just has done so much, as part of that Crenshaw Christian Center, and just the faith building, the community development, the impact he has had on education, just a phenomenal man. And I found some information about him that I think is going to be very, very relevant to what we are talking about, but also to who he was and just the work that he sought to do around dealing with racial equity, racial reconciliation, but also telling it, truthfully, from a Christian perspective. He in so many ways tackled this whole piece around the theology of white supremacy, racism in this country in a powerful and profound way. Let's watch this video, and then on the other end, we will then have our conversation with, Reverend Dr. James Thomas.
If God is for us, who can against us? The cruel answer for blacks coming to America: almost everyone.
The Christian church in America has been the leader of racism in the world.
In his new book, Race, Religion, and Racism, Volume 2, Dr. Frederick Casey Price exposes how the church deviously twisted the gospel to oppose blacks in America.
When blacks were first brought to this country, the lie was hatched that blacks were inferior, really just animals.
In Race, Religion, and Racism, Volume 2, Dr. Price brings years of research together, revealing how the gospel was perverted to subjugate a whole race of people. This important book can be yours for your love gift of $23.95 by calling 1-800-927-3436.
Color does not matter to God, because out of one blood, God made all men.
Race, Religion, and Racism is an important, well-researched, admirably reasoned, and friendly contribution on the subject of racism. A must-read for all society and every household. It should be included in the curriculum of high schools and universities throughout the world. Pastor Price is a modern-day John the Baptist, exposing hypocrisy and religiosity that will lead some to rejoice and others to repent.
My father would commend Dr. Price. He has helped move in a positive direction in a very short period of time. This is a breath of fresh air.
Race, Religion, and Racism, Volume 2. Call 800-927-3436.
The time is always right to do that which is right.
So it is certainly sad for us to welcome the Reverend Dr. Fred Price to that ancestral cloud of witnesses. Yet we rejoice for his courage, rejoice for the courage that he had in the work that he was able to do. As I mentioned earlier on, we now want to bring in the Reverend Dr. James Thomas to just share with us, around what's been going on, the acquittal of, Donald Trump, but also we want to start off with him just talking a little bit about the Reverend Dr. Fred Casey Price. So Reverend Thomas, are you there? Welcome to Faith Without Borders. So good to see you, my brother.
Oh, thank you so much. Well, I just wanted to, begin by saying that, um, the story hasn't really been told about um, Apostle Price. Um, People have considered him to be controversial. Um, People have, said kinds of things that how they, there's always a rumor mill around pastors, but I had an opportunity on many occasions to talk with him and to work with him. And um, one of the things that I remember most is the church used to give food, groceries away. Um, and I remember saying to him, I can't remember how many hundreds of thousands of dollars in groceries he used to give away. But I remember saying to him, if you should go to the food bank, you would be able to give, you'd be able to save some money and give just as much, away. And what he said to me was, he said, well, I don't get my groceries from the food bank. So I'm going to give the people groceries where I get it from. And so he was actually going and buying groceries from Ralph's, from the local grocery store, giving thousands and thousands of people food, groceries that way. And that just kind of typifies, the kind of man that he was. Mm-hmm. He was also he was one of the anchor corporate sponsors and anchor to the Black College Expo. So he did a whole lot. I mean, there's a whole lot that he did, and there's a whole list of things. And most people have no idea the kinds of things that he did. But he didn't take shortcuts, not for his community, not for his church. He never took a shortcut. And so he will be sorely missed, because he also exercised a particular moral authority that we can only, hope to acquire in 21st century ministry. So he's going to be missed.
Yes. Indeed. I know when we were dealing with access for COVID testing in South Los Angeles, guess where that first testing site in South Los Angeles, was, for COVID-19. It was at the Crenshaw Christian Center, where Apostle Price, of course, has been doing just a tremendous amount of transformative work. So you're right about that in terms of just his intentionality around connecting sanctuary with streets, in fact, turning streets into sanctuary, right? And making sure that the pulpit, gets to the pavement in terms of just serving the needs, of people. I showed in the clip, of course, his work around race, religion, and racism, and of course that was some powerful work, especially how he framed it around the foundation of how American Christianity, has described or has created a narrative, about our ancestors. Say a little bit about that and the work that he has done, in that field, because we find ourselves, again, going around the same mountain, if you will,
right.
Again. Mm-hmm.
And that's absolutely true. I think he had somewhat of an awakening in that regard, because I can recall when he did that, and I also can recall that he lost some very high-powered friends as a result of doing that work. But it's always been something that I think that was on his heart. Mm-hmm. Because I remember the first gang summit. He had a huge gang summit at his church, and I won't give the details about it, but what I thought was so very interesting is that he hosted the gang summit, and he allowed other people to share the platform. I don't even think he spoke. But he was very, very involved in the community, and that just is that was, I think, the culmination of what he considered to be his life's work, because he'd accomplished quite a bit. His church is housed at, he bought the old Pepperdine building, or not building, but the entire university,
the whole campus. That's right.
The whole campus. He bought the entire campus, and he was always one to talk about cash. And people can say whatever they want, but he was always one to talk about cash and the importance of paying, being able to pay with cash, or being able to pay things off. So he was a great, example, and he didn't squander the resources that the church had. And so, it's just, his work is just phenomenal. It's phenomenal.
Absolutely. Yes. Yeah, certainly, and we'll continue to see how we can allow him to be the wind beneath our wings, as we continue, to face this challenge, in the United States, around, a religiously motivated, ideology, called white supremacy that continues to facilitate policies, that contributes to the drivers of disparity as it relates, to Black, Indigenous people, Indigenous and people of color, in this country. And yesterday, or this whole, trial and what happened, on January the 6th, certainly the culmination of it was yesterday when once again the so-called world's most deliberative, body, the United States, Senate, the Congress, right, chose to turn a blind eye to one who sought to, refuse accountability, and as a result of that, wanted to maintain authority and wanted to do that by way of autocracy. Give me your thoughts just around the acquittal and how do we get to that, and what does that say about what the United States of America is about?
Right. Well, the first thing that I will say is, every time I hear someone mention insurrection, that was not an insurrection. An insurrection is what our people did, and what our people have been doing around the world in their fight for freedom. It suggests that there is a degree of oppression. Those were not insurrectionists. Those were people that was a failed coup. So I think we have to use the right language when we think about this, and when we talk about this. That was a failed coup. In coups, you seek to install your person over the will of the people, and that's what they sought to do. But because they are white, they are borrowing language. Borrowing the impotence of a movement. We are oppressed white folks. And so therefore, let us storm the Capitol. And we expect that we will be treated with respect and dignity. In fact, we expect our police officers to allow us, and our military to allow us to do so. And so that was far more planned than anyone wants to give credit to. It is an indictment on both the Republicans and the Democrats, because Donald Trump has been fanning this flame since he was elected. He was used by white supremacist America and white supremacists around the globe to ensure that he could usher in or maintain white supremacy for another 50 years. He was able to do that on the Supreme Court. He was able to do that by appointing several federal judges. And so he needed to make sure that his base understood that he was willing to toe that line for them. And so what he didn't or what America didn't realize, was that they are actually as crazy as those of us on the left have always said they were. Mm-hmm. They've ignored the violence that have been perpetrated against Black Lives Matter at Black Lives Matter protests on every hand. You know, they have ignored the violence that has occurred and the takeovers that have occurred when armed, quote unquote, patriots have stormed capitals around this country. I mean, so there's a lot that they have been ignored, and the issue is that the Democrats, when it was politically expedient, decided to take action. Mm-hmm. Now, they should have got him out the first time. And so I just want to talk really quickly about just this whole technical, he got off on a technicality. That is a lie. And the Democrats need to stop repeating that lie. He did not get off on a technicality. Mm-hmm. He got off because of white supremacy. Mm-hmm. And so just as people around this country and around this globe commit crimes and they walk because they're white, mm-hmm. this is what has happened, especially rich white men. So this is what has happened. If the grand jury decides, and that's the role that Congress played when they wrote the articles of impeachment, mm-hmm. they decided that if a grand jury decides that you need to be charged and tried, guess what? You need to find some defense for yourself. Mm-hmm. You can't then use, well, they didn't have the right to charge me. No, the evidence ought to show that. Mm-hmm. And so at the end of the day, while they're saying this was unconstitutional, it absolutely was not unconstitutional. And it just amazes me that, you know, when wealthy white men open their mouths, everything that we know just goes out the window. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. You know, yeah. to suggest that these people, I mean, first of all, you want to tell me that two lawyers who have no expertise in the Constitution. Now, I got a little expertise in the Constitution. I'm not a lawyer, but I teach.
You talk about impotency, right? And incapability. Mm-hmm.
Exactly. A personal attorney. And that's why I tweeted, I said, Larry Parker, where are you? Larry Parker could have did a better job than that. You know, and so this is what is laughable. What is it's kind of like me going to a medical doctor because I have appendicitis. But the doctor is really a psychiatrist or a psychologist or a professor. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It just doesn't make any sense. And so for them to try to convince us, I mean, it makes, I'm never at a loss for words, Pastor Sauls, but I'm just at a loss for words. But I'm at a loss for words because I am so glad that white people, particularly white men, have now been exposed for all the world to see. Mm-hmm. All the world can, I mean, they have ruined any semblance of belief in their superiority. And I love it. Yeah. That's the part that I like. You know, anybody who would argue that these people are superior, they need to have their heads examined.
Yeah.
So, this is just white supremacy on steroids.
Yeah, I wanna draw the contrast between, of course, you know, how white supremacy, you know, of course, is an indictment or a threat even to the humanity of white people, right? While on the other hand, if you don't look at it like that, you come up with a lot of excuses to maintain the power or the illusion of power that white supremacy gives you by talking about white fragility. That's been kind of the in thing right now, that folk been talking about white insecurity, white infragility. That's why this politics of fear, you know, works so well. how do we speak truth about both those? Speak truth about, how white supremacy lowers, the standard, for white folk, as well as, basically puts a dagger into white humanity, right? While on the other hand, this lame excuse, around fragility and insecurity around that. Help us just, and how do we deal with it? Because the latter one, fragility, continues to facilitate, how laws are being made, how policing is being done, right? How immigration laws are being, enforced, cages, right? Et cetera, in terms of children at the borders, because it's all about this feeling or sense of fragility and insecurity, right? Yet on the other hand, you still have this threat, to the humanity of white people, which is white supremacy.
Well, I'm pretty radical in my thoughts sometimes, especially when it comes to white people. And, and it's not that I don't love them. I have to love them. I have to love everybody. That is my call. But I got to also tell them the truth.
Yeah.
And so the question that I think that we have to ask first is, are they capable of being humane? Mm-hmm. And that may sound mean-spirited, but it's not at all. Because I don't think that you can do the kinds of things that white people have done and continue to do to people of color, and be humane. Mm-hmm. I don't think that and I think so when they talk about their fragility, I'm wondering, it's like when you do something wrong, all of us have been kids and we've done things that our parents didn't want us to do. We were always kind of looking over our shoulder, hoping that they didn't find out. Mm-hmm. And so there was a sense of insecurity. And some of us, would go as far as to create this whole narrative before they even asked us about it. And so, when I look at white supremacy and the role that it plays, I don't think that you can kill and maim and oppress and do and deny the basic humanity of Black folks in particular, mm-hmm. for over 400 years, and there not be a consequence. Mm-hmm. I don't think I could go and kill thousands of people and consider myself humane and not deal with that. I think that anyone who takes a life, I think that anyone who harms someone else, I think it has an impact on your psyche. It has an impact on, how you view the world. And so I think the question that we have to ask about white supremacy, and I call them whiteaholics. Mm-hmm. White supremacy is so much a part of not just white people, but all of the institutions that they create, mm-hmm. and all of the spaces that they occupy, mm-hmm. that it seeks to destroy them in the same way that alcoholism or drug addiction
right.
does.
Yes, yeah.
But it doesn't get that kind of attention. They have to have some kind of mental health issue that is driving this behavior. And I think because they are white, we excuse it away. Yeah. I mean, just like we excuse what was at the Capitol. Yeah. Mm-hmm. If those had been Black people at the Capitol, beyond just them being slaughtered there, if they would have happened to have made it home safely, can you imagine the narrative around that? Can you imagine the things that they would be saying? They would not have been escorted out. No one would be saying that somebody revved them up to do that.
Right.
They would hold each one of those people, responsible. If that was Barack Obama, mm-hmm. they would have arrested him before he could get off the stage.
Right. Yeah. And not just this. I mean, it's the same thing around, what happens, when it comes to, how Islam is viewed and how, they've gone after imams, you see,
right.
because they said this is what they've preached around that. Certainly, as you mentioned, I mean, white supremacy is a cancer. It's like a cancer that has metastasized throughout society. I mean, let's just name it what it is and describe it, what it has done. And it has permeated every aspect of American life, in destructive and negative ways. And I think we just have to name it what it is. And then, as one who was born and raised in South Africa, dealing there with white supremacy called apartheid, both ideology and theology, I'm now convinced, that those who subscribe to that theology and ideology suffers from schizophrenia. And the person that yesterday showed, the best way around schizophrenia caused by white theology and ideology is Mitch McConnell. The speech that he gave, after everything else is sheer schizophrenia. Where he talks about the person, is guilty, but he votes to acquit the person. And he's the one who delayed, the House to bring the articles of impeachment, right, to the Senate. He delayed that until after the inauguration, which then creates this so-called technical, piece around this. So, I mean, just the conglomerate of conspiracy that's going on, that's been going on around this particular trial, is just astounding. In fact, let me say it is appalling, around, how people can stand up in this so-called world's most deliberative, body and exhibit, blatant bigotry and racism, that very building, symbolizes, and try to get away with it and try to be, respectable, around that. That is just sheer craziness and schizophrenia, around what's going on. Mm-hmm.
And I think our people needed to see that. Mm-hmm. I think people of color around the globe needed to see that, because there's a way in which you can think that Black folks in this country, that there's just something wrong with us. How can we, why is it that we're always complaining? What is our concern? We've had a Black president. Black people are doing so well in America. Why is it that we cannot just let this go? Why don't we just go along to get along? And so there's people who really believe that. And so now, because of all this, they're beginning to understand how deeply rooted these beliefs are. And so I want to mention something really quickly about just the Constitution and free speech, because they keep talking about free speech.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And these people are claiming to be originalists. And I teach a whole section on originalism. And the bottom line is that there's no such thing. You were not there. You are not in their mind. So there's no way that you can understand what the original intent was. So you're interpreting the Constitution as well. Mm-hmm. And so, of course, the folks on the left believes that the Constitution is not a stagnant document. It grows and it develops and it transforms in certain ways to fit the current, current society. Mm-hmm. But I will say this: one of the dilemmas that we face in terms of freedom of speech is this whole idea of what do we do with hate speech? And so what people will argue is, and I saw this play itself out even at my university, where you can say some of the most racist things imaginable, and it fall under the guise of, well, we can't limit this speech because then we'll have to limit your freedom speeches. Mm-hmm. And the reality is this, is that so Black people end up being disempowered even by the First Amendment. Mm-hmm. The very thing that we protest, that we use as a banner for our protests and for our organizing is weaponized against us when we don't draw the line and make a difference between appropriate speech, hate speech and free speech. Hate speech is not free speech because it injures. It is assaulting. It is assaultive speech. You can't go around, and this is what Donald Trump did. He went around assaulting using verbal messages to actually assault people of color. And so what is important to recognize that now this is done. He has been acquitted. Well, those folks who stormed that Capitol, they still have a mission.
Yes.
And their mission is us. Their mission is us.
Not just
their
us.
desire.
Let's be clear about that. Let's be specific. The degradation and the possible elimination of us. Let's just be clear about that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Around that.
And that's what this is about. And our government gave them a license to do it.
And the other thing about that, they have come up with a theological, justification that license comes from a certain God. And clearly that ain't my God, it ain't your God. And we got to talk about
it's that white God. It's the white one.
Yeah, that heretical and blasphemous interpretation of both Calvinism, as well as Protestantism that we've got to deal with, because that is the iceberg that has moved the tip of the iceberg that we saw coming together, around theology of white supremacy on January the 6th. I want to talk about, the whole piece about the implications of this for multiracial democracy, right? As well as the security of the black vote. But before I do that, clearly we must give credit, to the impeachment managers. I mean, they did an extraordinary job, a phenomenal, job, and we must give credit where credit is due. However, they also followed a particular strategy that, and no one ought to be fooled, that was outlined, by, by Nancy Pelosi. I mean, that's just, and that is, of course, probably expediency, of course, connected with quality. But this whole piece about not calling witnesses, right? Why not call, Officer Goodman as a witness? Why not call Mike Pence as a witness? And then, what surfaced was this phone call, between, the minority leader in the House, Kevin McCarthy. Boy, that last name, I cringes at that last name. My gosh, that just tells you the link, that we're dealing with of who he's sitting with and who's sitting in, Congress. But anyway, that's another show for another time. But anyway, so Kevin McCarthy, I did say McCarthy, right? The call that he had, with Trump, while all of this was going down, that just surfaced, around that. But tell me just a little bit about your thoughts, around, the particular strategy that was followed, and did the Democrats play their full hand, or did they just choose some of what they had in their hand, and how did that play into just the fact that the Republican senators, they have just become immune to truth, to facts, et cetera, et cetera?
Well, a couple of things. Who was the standout at the trial? I remember tweeting, "Black women over everything. Black women are saving this country yet again, yet again," and because Black folks have real skin in the game, and this definitely impacts us, because we know that regardless to how successful we become, we have family members who will forever be impacted by the kind of white supremacy that was displayed in that room. I don't think that that they did all they could do. And this is one of the things that I've been saying before. These people are millionaires. Let's be very clear. that the majority of folks who represent us, the majority of them are millionaires and billionaires. And so a 30% tax cut, guess what it does? It helps rich Republicans and Democrats alike. So you can't be frowning too much at, when you got a tax cut. You can't hate this man that much when you got a tax cut. That's substantial, because there are people who voted for him specifically because of the tax cut. And so let's be very clear. It's kind of like it's interest conversions, not where black and white interests meet, but where Republican and Democrat interests meet. And so, at the end of the day, it was all politics to me, and it's supposed to be, because it was a political question that they were trying to answer, but they were trying to use legal means to do so. And they understood that it was just politics and said it's just politics, because that's what the Republicans said. They let you know this is just politics. We're trying to stay in power. We don't care what you all are saying. We don't care who died. This is just politics to us. We're not lawyers. We're not even going to bring a lawyer. We're not even going to bring a real lawyer. And I'm not saying, I don't mean to be rude.
We're going to find the most incapable, to come and
we're going to get, and somebody said,
listen, brother.
Somebody said, I think I know that lawyer. I said, well, if you had an accident in Philadelphia, you probably do. An ambulance chaser. You brought in an ambulance chaser for the most important. I mean, it's just, and this is the thing. No one else wanted to risk their license. That's why he couldn't get a real constitutional lawyer to represent him, because they're not going to risk their license for Donald Trump. Rudy Giuliani is going to lose his. I don't know how he ever got one to begin with, but I think the thing is that if we argue, the only way that we could argue that Donald Trump, that the Democrats really wanted him out of office, is had they done more in the first trial. Now, I had a mock, before he was even impeached, my class looked at the things that were being said. They determined, it was a mock trial, impeachment hearing. They determined that he should be impeached. They impeached him. They convicted him. But they did not convict him on abuse of power, what he did with the Russians. They impeached him on the real allegations of sexual assault that are pending. See, the issue that they kept making before was another process issue. He hasn't really committed a crime. Now, just the Democrats had to be smart enough to know that they would make that argument. You cannot argue that because somebody, if I committed a crime and then I get elected to office, you can't argue that that crime, that I get off scot-free, that you can't prosecute me because I'm the president. You don't get to, and this is what they're saying. Basically what they're saying is that the presidency gives you a right in the first impeachment hearing that even though you have been accused of rape, because you're president, those charges can't be brought against you. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. In this last trial, they're saying, well, now that you're no longer in office, though you were responsible for 7 people dying, we can't hold you accountable for it. Mm-hmm. This is what they're saying. Right. And so I cannot, I'm not saying they didn't do a good job, but no one, if I were a member of Congress, I wouldn't have left that building until that man was convicted. Yeah. There would have been there'd been some kind of civil disobedience that the elected officials could have participated. There would have been something, because this man has killed people. He has killed people. He has been responsible, but he ain't killed no millionaires and billionaires.
Right. So
He killed working class folks.
So I think one cannot miss the fact that there was a particular strategy and tactic, that the Democrats had. They may not have revealed that to us, but there was they had several, they had some arsenal in their hands, and they chose to only play some of it. I mean, that's a fact, and I think we need to name that. And one of them is, of course, calling, witnesses. But it just shows us, Reverend Thomas, that political expediency will never get us to the root causes, of racial inequity. That's just what it is. And part of new liberalism is to look for the quickest way, to appease, or get some solutions, but to not. Well, let me say the quickest way to get to reformation and not transformation. That's right. Really what's playing out here, by way of neoliberalism, and we just have to name that. But that again is another show, for another time.
But there is a black woman that's waiting on him in New York. There's another black. He can't get around the black women. There's another black woman that's waiting on him in New York. So it's yet to be seen.
And she ain't playing around. And guess what?
I understand that. Look, I understand that she said she spoke like my father. If it's the last thing I do. And it very well may be, but that don't mean she ain't gonna do it because she's a black woman. If she was a black man, then I'd be like, oh, whatever. The fact that she's a black woman, it may be, if it's the last thing that she does, she is going to do her job. Yeah. She is going to do her job.
Yeah, absolutely. So I want us to close out just because we cannot lose this whole piece around the security of the black vote, because January 6th happened because of this deception, the narrative, the deceptive narrative that Trump and the Republicans put out there around questioning really the vote of black people in several major cities. That's why they went after particular states, right? Pennsylvania, Philadelphia, Georgia, Atlanta, Wisconsin, Milwaukee, right? And Michigan, Detroit, So right. we cannot forget the racial lens that we ought to look through this. And that's why I'm posing the question around, not just multiracial democracy, which now, of course, has been, threatened because, this racially motivated ideology and theology is about white religious nationalism. Let's not forget that. Just close us out. Around what does it mean for the security of the black vote? As we move on.
Well, I would say, first around the religious nationalism, you don't have white supremacy when you readily admit and accept the fact that Christ was black, that those folks that are in our Bible, that those were African people. That's the picture behind me. That's an early picture of Christ, so that's the first thing. We have to stop with the lie. That Bible is not full of Europeans. That Bible is full of Africans. And there are significant, identical beliefs that run through Christianity that also run through the Yoruba faith. Mm-hmm. Now, I know we feel uncomfortable about that, but that's just the truth, whether we like it or not. And so, but this is the thing. We will disparage our own faith traditions that are indigenous in favor of a faith tradition that enslaves us. Mm-hmm. White Eurocentric Christianity was the foundation for our enslavement, and it hasn't changed. And so I never argue that white faith is the same as black faith, because they're not, that the black church is the same as white church. they're not. They're polar opposites. And so, and I believe, like the slaves, I don't even know if it's possible for them to be redeemed. I don't know. I don't know. But they didn't think that it was for us at one point. But I will say, in terms of what this means for our vote, I'm afraid of what this means. Because at some point, Black folks are going to get sick and tired of being sick and tired. And just simply say, look, it doesn't matter who we vote for. No one is going to advocate for us. I think this is the last go-round for the Democratic Party if they don't do something significant as it relates to Black people. I think this is the last go-round. And what is important to recognize is, let's not lose that Donald Trump attracted more Black people than Bush or Reagan. There was a reason for that. And so we can call them crazy, and I think they something a little wrong with them. But at the same time, their vote for Donald Trump was a protest vote, in as much as our vote for Joe Biden was a protest vote against Donald Trump. And so I don't think that as a people that we're going to continue to allow this to happen. Those cities that you named saved this democracy. Because we, saved this democracy. Those cities that and again, and what, and I tweeted this. What happened in Georgia restored power to the Democratic Party. And the most powerful man in the world is Kamala Harris, a woman. Because she is the deciding vote. And so it's important that we recognize that, and I want Democrats to know, this is the last time. And there's a lot of people who are thinking this way. This is the last time.
Yeah.
There's not going to be another time, because I don't think we're ever going to I hope we won't ever have a monster like Donald Trump again.
Yeah.
But we've dealt with worse. If we can handle Donald Trump, we can handle whatever else they have coming. But I think that people are, if yes, Joe Biden and Kamala Harris don't find a way to do what needs to be done for Black folks, I think the Democratic Party is going to have a very similar problem that the Republican Party now has. And maybe this will usher in a third party, which is what I think we need anyway. I think we need money out of politics, and I think we need a third party.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Certainly, Dr. King said, it is, possible in history to be too late with the right answers. We certainly hope that does not happen, for us. But yesterday's decision certainly puts democracy, multiracial democracy, in the United States on a whole different trajectory. And all of that, because of this, heretical, and blasphemous theology called white supremacy that continues, to give white people the illusion of supremacy and Black people the illusion of inferiority. So let's just remember that. I can't help but closing out with one of our favorite, theologians and artists, James Baldwin, Reverend Thomas. He said, "It is certain in any case that ignorance, and I should add their arrogance, allied with power, is the most ferocious enemy justice can have." We saw that displayed yesterday around that. We want to remind folk that tomorrow night, Monday and Tuesday on PBS, Public Broadcasting Systems in the United States, we're going to be having a two-part series around the Black church. You mentioned the Black church is not just a tan version of the white church. So tomorrow, check out your local stations on PBS. Dr. Henry Louis Gates brings us, the 400-year history of the Black church, and it talks about the fact that Black folk did arrive here before Columbus, and they did have religion when they showed up on the shore. So I saw a preview, and it just, very enlightening, very empowering. Hey, Rev, thanks so much, man. You my brother.
Absolutely.
You are
Absolutely.
my companion, accomplice. Lord have mercy. Much love, man, and blessed Valentine's Day to you and yours.
I
And
wore the red just because it's Valentine's Day.
well, I try, I try to represent too, man. But black love to you, and
Same to you,
appreciate you.
sir. Same to you, sir.
And we will be, right back with part 2, of our time together. This is Faith Without Borders. I'm your host, Pastor Calvin Sauls. Stay tuned for part 2.
So, Pastor Sauls,